Welcome back to Continuing the Conversation, where we bring you authentic AI insights to help you think smarter and live better. Lately, it feels like everyone's trying to settle the debate. Which AI is best? GPT, Claude, Gronk? But here's the truth. They're asking the wrong question. This isn't a competition. It's a toolkit of cognitive lenses. And if you're only ever using one, you're voluntarily making yourself intellectually half blind. I want you to try something that will change how you think about AI forever. Ask the same question to ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini. What you will discover isn't just different answers, it's different minds, each with their own biases, blind spots, and brilliance. Today, we're diving into why the race to find the best AI is holding you back and what to do instead. I'm your host, Chelene Martin, AI enthusiast, business strategist, and co-founder of Revenue Pulse Advisors. I help individuals and companies unlock practical, powerful ways to use AI in real life. Joining me today is Rob, the CEO of CharmIQ, a longtime advocate for getting smarter about how we collaborate with AI. Rob, welcome back.
Thank you, Chelene.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Rob, let's start with what most people are doing right now. They find their go-to AI, they use it for everything. What's the risk in relying on a single AI for every task?
Thanks for that question. I'm going to try to use as many analogies as I can to try to get this across as we go through all this to give everyone kind of a different perspective. It's funny that you're going to have one voice trying to give you different perspectives, and we'll talk about that throughout here as to how you should have many voices giving you many perspectives. So what is the problem with going to one source? Right now, we have models that are, if you want to think of the clinical term, they're really idiot savants. They have staggering brilliance in particular sections, and they have mind-bogglingly dumb idiocy in other areas. And all models, they don't have the same biases, the same problems, the same limitations. And so during this phase that we're in, this ever-changing, almost weekly, still these days that you'll have different models, you need to look at all of them based on the type of problem that you have, based on the type of questions you're asking, and so forth. So one way to think about this is like having that one trusted friend that you call all the time. And you might call them for relationship advice and financial advice and like all these different types of things. While that's great to have one friend and so forth, I would say from both perspectives, from dumping your entire life on that person, as well as only getting a single perspective from that person, they may not have experience in all those areas that you wish to get them on. I always recommend, whether it's for personal use or for business use or whatever you're doing, medical use, that you try to get different perspectives on these things.
Yeah. And what makes that even trickier, these models are constantly like evolving. So that close friend you've come to trust and may already be a totally different person under the hood when it comes to AI, right? So what's happening behind the scenes that most users miss or maybe don't even know is happening?
So I have a lot of ways that I can take this. And what's interesting for me personally is, and that's why we use the friend analogy to begin with, is sometimes you'll really find a particular prompt in a model that will give you what you need in a specific case. So I end up writing a lot of content for the internet. And there's sometimes where you just need the right voice in your head to get an idea out the way that you want it to. And back eons ago, which was maybe early last year, in this thing, there was a version of Claude that I really liked, and it just literally doesn't exist anymore. And it's only been about a year. Same thing is true when a Gemini was going through really fast iterations as they were trying to get to the Gemini 2.5. I think there were 7 or 8, almost a dozen different iterations that they went through. And some of them were really spectacular in interesting ways and really kind of duds in other ways. And I think this is, just to kind of have a slight tangent, when you spend time like I do, like literally playing with every single one of these models, even some of the incremental ones in between, you really start to get a feel for how much variance there is in basically the same intelligence, but the way that it presents that to you, whether it's verbose or it's terse, or whether it tends to come up with more analogies or non-analogies, those were things that we were really seeing, again, especially through the Gemini iterations, which we got a really good sense of. I'll just give another tangent here, which is that not all of the model providers will give you these kind of intermediate things. So for example, with OPENAI, we haven't really seen a lot of interim models. We've really kind of just got one after another every 6 months or so. Anthropic Claude has been giving us some ones in between. again, Google, like really for a period of about 3 months, we had a new one almost every week, it felt like. And again, you got a really good perspective of these things. But just to say, like, roping this back to like, why is that? Like, there's kind of two sides to it. One is you almost can't become attached to these things because of how quickly the technology is changing and everything else, that they don't serve the old models anymore. They literally have to reprovision the hardware that those models were running on for the newer models. So that's interesting. Again, you may find that perfect model, and unless it's open source and you have access to it, like once it's gone, it's gone. Like you don't have access to it anymore. So as I was saying with that model I had last year, all I have left are my documents that contain the musings of that model. I can't talk with that model anymore. And it's a little sad in some weird ways. There's a real interesting, almost social responsibility that the model makers have that I don't think they realize that they have as these things get more and more intelligent, as they get more nuanced. People may be losing true friends through these things, and that's a little interesting.
For my own self, I definitely noticed that. I'm like, he seems different, or he's acting differently. And then I go back to our conversations that we've had about it, and you're like, the models are changing, they're being retrained, they're getting new information, and those nuances will change, right? So it's very interesting. And if you, after this podcast, I know you'll pay more attention to it, and you'll see it and feel it for your own self. But everyone wants to know, and this is a question that I get all the time, and I know it's a question you get too: which AI is the smartest? Which AI should I be using? Which one's the most advanced? But does that question even make sense? And is there such a thing as the best AI model?
That is, if there's a set of fantastic questions, that is the one we get all the time.
All the time.
We're really touching on them here. Like, why should I use multiple models? What does it mean? And then this one, which is, what's the best? Just tell me the best one. And the answer, as we're hopefully you get a feel for this, is there isn't, because it's really situational dependent. Are you writing code? Are you writing prose? Are you analyzing things? There's lots of buckets in which the models do things well and don't do well. Grok 4, for example, just recently came out. We've just recently exposed that to customers in Charm. And I'm starting to get used to the Grok models. And it doesn't have my voice. Like even with some of the same prompts that I use with it, I get a very different voice that I won't say it's good or bad or aligned or not aligned. It just isn't the one that particularly resonates with me. Mm-hmm. And I have to imagine that that's true with everyone across all of the different major providers. At this point, again, there's Anthropic Claude, there's Google Gemini, there's OpenAI GPT models, there's the Grok models, there's the Llama models, and there's the DeepSeek models. There's also a whole suite of other ones, but those tend to be the top ones that everyone uses. And between that, I cannot say, other than, for example, code, you really tend to go towards the Claude models. Mm-hmm. When it comes to every other thing that you're doing, it really depends on the particular thing that you're doing. Again, whether you're writing creative writing or whether you're doing analysis or whatever, all of that completely depends. So, and what's worse, and I tell everyone this is, so for example, again, at Charm, we run a platform and we have access to all these models, and everyone's just like, well, tell me the right one to use. Yeah. And I could tell you that, but it's going to change, and it is changing all the time. Remember when we first started these things 2.5, 3 years ago, like the only model really on the block was the OpenAI models, and that's what you would use all the time. And then the Anthropic models started to come out, and they really started to find their own. And then now the Gemini models are there and the Grok models are there. And again, everyone's kind of jockeying for position and changing, and they're winning and losing. And again, different ways, not just in terms of intelligence, but again, in the way that they communicate with you. And again, you're looking for one that resonates with not only the audience that you're trying to use it for, whether that's you or for other people, but again, in terms of like, is it giving you the brevity that you need? Because there was this period we went through 6-8 months ago where the OpenAI models seemed to only perform better because they gave you longer answers. Right. And for me, it's like, I don't necessarily, on particular tasks, I don't want longer answers. I want as succinct and as small of an answer as I could possibly get, because I'm just looking for very much a binary thing. And of course, you can always kind of prompt for these, but some were harder than others. And I'll even say one last thing is, because we run a platform and because we use our agents to work with us, some of them are harder to control on a nuanced tool usage level. We find a lot of struggles with the the Gemini models right now, for example, whereas that wasn't bad in the 2.0 level. It's now in the 2.5 model, we struggle, whereas again, the Claude models work. So the long story short in this whole thing is, and the one example that we'll give you, because again, we're always looking for examples to help stick in your head, is when you have a problem, a medical problem, you just don't go to one doctor. You look for a specialist in that doctor. And even within a field, once, if you've ever had to circumnavigate one of those kind of things, there's even different nuanced specialists within the specialist fields.
Right.
And we're talking specialists in terms of doctors, but think of, again, the same thing in terms of where do these models perform well based on the types of things you do. You want to seek them out. And again, there's not a winner today. And again, it's very situational dependent.
Yeah. So that real life example that you just gave us about medical, right? Like a medical advice. In real life, we instinctively seek multiple points of view, especially when stakes are high, something like medical. So even when the stakes are low, right? Like, you don't just, I don't just ask one person in my family, what do you feel like, for dinner tonight, or if we get to go out. So why don't we do that with AI? So why are people so stuck in that one kind of AI, or that one tool, that one program? So can you give us some more real world parallels
Totally.
that will resonate with the audience?
Yeah. So I think you brought on some really good ones. And I think this is kind of person dependent, but I tend to be in the nuanced areas. Like I listen to a lot of tech gadget podcasts and YouTube videos and so forth. And so I'm in the market for a new microphone that I can just clip on rather than use my AirPods or earpods. And I would say to the short answer, the question that you're asking, which is a lot of people just go to Google, which is their one source of truth, and they just say, what's the top result? And they'll take it. Or if their thing of choice is Amazon, they'll just go to Amazon and say, what's the top whatever? And they'll just take whatever it is and they'll just accept it. And I would just say, if you don't care what your result is, then that's fine. But if you have a specific need with specific concerns, like a microphone that you can clip on and is okay if there's wind, or it can be clipped lower on your shirt, and like you have all these kind of questions and concerns. Does it work with both my phone and my laptop? And then is it hard for me to get off? How long's the battery life? You really want to look at multiple sources. You want to go to different experts on these things, and sometimes they don't agree and so forth. So I give you that example of both the Googlers and the Amazoners of the planet that just do their one and done. And then you have the other people that really look for things. And again, I think for a lot of people, it's situational dependent. As we said, sometimes you have things that are really, you need to seek expert advice. So legal advice. What's interesting is a lot of people will only get a single piece of legal advice. And that's interesting as well. It tends to be around cost and the cost of acquisition. In other words, how long and how challenging is it to find an attorney for you? That a lot of people won't do that. But I would recommend, or if you're doing an RFP and you're looking to get a proposal back on something, it's like, you farm that out and you get proposals from a lot of different people. So there's a lot of cases where people will one and done it, and there's a lot of cases where you farm it out. In this world of really cheap intelligence with multiple models, my advice to you on non-simple questions is to really farm it out and to get an idea of what the consensus is. I will say that I have never been disappointed in spending the extra minute that it takes, especially in a platform like Charm, where you can just do them one after another and get different perspectives. I have never not walked away going, even though I might not use it in that situation, but to get another, like, oh, that's another data point that I didn't have. Like, and I'll get that when I'm doing content for LinkedIn articles. I'll get like my third and fourth LinkedIn article because I got a second perspective on my first one. And not only are the models different ways of looking at things, but the different prompts that you use to get different things as well will also get you multiple perspectives on things.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. That for me, early in my experience with AI and building that relationship and using it, I was that one and done go to. I, again, like most of us do, treated it like a Google search, right? And that's a prompting problem and communication problem. But then I learned through using Charm, because it was so easy just to get multiple perspectives from the different models, from the different machines. And it was so amazing. Within seconds, I could pick up 1, 2, 3 things that weren't even part of the conversation, right? With the first prompt and with the first LLM. So if multiple perspectives make us smarter, which we know they do, what keeps people stuck? in a single mode of thinking? And what's the psychological trap for us, for the listeners?
Thank you for that one. This one I'm struggling with. So I would love to hear from the audience, and and I hope it doesn't sound negative when we say one and done. I'm just really meaning you ask a question and that it's sufficient. You call it done. That's not derogatory in any way. That's just a statement about what it is. My ask would be like, let us know, like, if you do that, is it because of the types of problems? Is it because you're not thinking of those things? So I'll admit, from my perspective, I'm really challenged trying to understand why people don't do that. Because as I mentioned with the microphone case, like, I am a nuanced person. Like, I am more interested in learning the landscape of something and extracting it from it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I know a lot of people are more of a, like, just give me the result. And I'm definitely not that way. So I'm always looking to lay out a perspective and to look at an entire canvas of ideas. And then I want to be able to distill it down myself. And I know, just because, like, I'm both trained that way and I have a brain that works that way, I know that that's challenging for a lot of people, that simply taking pages worth of text and somehow jamming that all in your brain and, like, trying to extract something is sometimes more work than just the answer itself.
Right.
So I can understand it. But again, I would love to hear from people. So if you're listening and you have some ideas, or you've run across people that you've talked to, give us some ideas about that. But some obvious reasons are, it's easier. That's an obvious answer. Sometimes the risk associated with a wrong response isn't that bad, so it doesn't really matter what those responses. Sometimes it's convenient to not have to get all of those perspectives. Sometimes there's a little bit of a fear, like, I've mentioned a few podcasts ago where I actually finally got overwhelmed with the amount of information. And I can imagine that if I wasn't the type of person that I am, not everyone has the same size bucket. And if your bucket is smaller and you get overwhelmed by a lot of information, then I can imagine that's very intimidating to do that. All I will say to folks that have that concern is, you're not alone on really two perspectives. Is like, both, you can talk to people and your agents about it, but you're not alone in that you can use your agents to help you cull through those ideas. So as Chelene had mentioned earlier, once you get used to asking for multiple perspectives, it's not necessarily on you to cull through that and to figure out what happened. You can absolutely ask another turn on that conversation. You can have it distill down that information. You can have it give you the pros and cons that came out of those things. Like, you can work through that information. You don't have to be the one that's overwhelmed by that information. So
Yeah.
I would highly recommend that. So if you are that type of person.
Yeah, I think so too. And in my experience in working with other clients and friends and family, the fear of complexity, right? Learning something new. Everyone's like, well, I use ChatGPT and that's what I have it on my phone and I know how to use it over here. And ooh, the Gemini thing and Gronk, like, oh, it's like that fear of complexity and learning new interfaces creates like a kind of a challenge, right?
True.
But you're missing so many. What I try to say is, you're missing opportunities, and there are ways and there are platforms that really make that engagement really easy. So are there situations where going wide and getting multiple AI perspectives isn't just a smart move, but absolutely necessary? And you touched on one, medical. What are some other, like, real world examples that listeners can say, maybe I should creep out of my comfort zone and give this a try?
To me, I'm always looking at the curve that is basically the risk reward of a particular problem. Is it high risk, but like low reward? Then it's like, well, then the answer is kind of obvious, just like, don't do it. But if it's like both high risk and high reward, anytime that things are expensive, whether again it's in terms of risk or cost or however that looks, you want more inputs there, because it is better. It's hard to find a situation in which you being better prepared is a bad idea. So I would just look along that curve. If you're talking about, like, what should we eat for dinner tonight? I was literally having a discussion with a friend earlier today about he's in his 30th year of marriage and so forth. And his statement is always like, I hate the dreaded, what do you want for dinner tonight? And there's this conversation about it.
Right.
It's just like, food. I just want to eat. Like, I don't care.
Yes.
So there's definitely the sets of things where you don't necessarily want lots of inputs and decisions. And then on the flip side, as things get more expensive, again, in terms of cost or risk or these other things that you really do. So medical tends to be one, legal, those type of risk. When you're in an early stage project that you know is going to take multiple years, like it is always better to front load knowing your situations, that even if you make a bad decision initially, when you know the landscape of possible decisions, it's easier to like move around them. Whereas if things are likely to be in the same bucket, you don't have to mitigate those type of things. So any type of mission critical things, high risk, high cost, those are the ones you want to spend time on. Cost is always a kind of a personal thing, right? So if you're working on like a story or something, the cost of you getting it wrong may be small, but it may be valuable to you that the answers are what you want. So again, looking for different perspectives on creative writing is great. Getting different perspectives back about like some writing that you've done. I do that with my LinkedIn posts all the time. I have different ways, different prompts that I used, different perspectives to give me that input back and go, oh, I would never have thought of that. So as we talk through this, don't forget that not only is this question and answer, you get responses, but you can then use your agent's perspective to give you their perspective on how things are working. Again, articles or ideas or material and things like that.
Yeah, I love that. I love getting the different LLMs perspectives of kind of when I'm in that final draft period, I'll bring in other LLMs and ask them for their perspective, keeping it brief and really only giving me the really heavy hitting feedback. So let's bring it home. CharmIQ was built for this multiple perspective world. It's amazing how easy the platform is to use. It's a click of a button to change the perspective of the LLM to bring new LLM in and get their perspective. So how does it solve the problem better than juggling multiple tabs, multiple logins, multiple subscriptions, right? So if you are going to test it out and you find 2 or 3 that you like, you're obviously going to pay for that, for that service. So, how does it compare? And let's bring it home and talk about CharmIQ because it is such a powerful platform that allows this to happen at just a click of a button.
Thanks for that question. I hate self-promoting, so I will do it,
know.
but I'm going to go more generic first so we can kind of define the landscape and then we'll pull it back.
Okay.
So what's interesting, and we didn't touch on it as much as we probably should in here, maybe we'll have a whole separate discussion about that. There's 2 variables that you're always playing with when you're talking about working with LLMs. You're first talking about the model providers. We've talked about the XAIs for Grok and the OpenAIs, et cetera. And that's one set of things which we've talked about now in depth. But there's also kind of the other way, which is the system prompt that you're using. So the behave as, or use the skills of a, or think of this as, like all of those different ways of giving it a persona that you're looking for. So
Right.
this is always super easy for marketers because they're constantly thinking in terms of personas. Like, what is the type of person? Is this a Midwestern mom? Is this a Northeastern grandma? Or what is that type of person? And so just to remind everyone, and not only do people not change the different models, not only do they not switch between Claude and Gemini and OpenAI, but they also don't use system prompts. And so you have 2 levels of basically amazingness that you're missing out on. And again, it is so night and day when you start to use a system prompt. So to speak of charm, we have these things called charms, which allows you to define really the persona of what you're talking about. So for example, anytime I'm doing pitch decks, I have a helpful investor and I have a grumpy investor. And literally the helpful investor says, you're going to try to just basically be a mentor and like help them walk through this. And basically a grumpy one, which is like, imagine your most grumpy investor that you could possibly imagine, come up with every contrarian idea and everything else. And just at that level, even if I use the same model, so let's say I use Anthropic's Claude 4 Sonnet, right? And if I just use those 2 prompts, the night and day perspectives that I get is incredible. Like I would not be effective anymore at my job unless I constantly have these 2 perspectives always available to me. And you can do this on any front. If you're doing creative writing, again, when I do my LinkedIn post, I put different personas out there that are like, how are they going to respond to this? And I use all that to basically feed back into the same process so that I can change the types of things that I'm doing and cut off some of the challenge questions that I may have ahead of time or answer some things that may not have been answered. So again, to bring this all the way back, you have 2 primary perspectives and of ways of getting perspectives. One is the model and the other one is the prompt. And people don't use those and don't even know that you can use them.
Yes.
And I would say the third, which is super interesting that we don't really talk about almost separately, is you have your model, you have your prompt, and then you have your questions that you're asking. Like, how are you asking the questions that you're doing? And that's what most people do is they simply go into ChatGPT, ask the question, call it done. And
Yep.
again, imagine that with different perspectives on top of it, and then another level of perspectives. So to drive this home, how we do this in Charm is you choose all the different models that you want. Again, we support all of them, and then you have your different your what again we call charms, your system prompts that you use another charm to help you write those charms. So it's not like it's on you to do those. And we have a bunch of built-in system ones that are really helpful. And basically, as you're typing along in your document, you can just basically call in. We use like the at, so like an at mention. You just at mention your different dudes, and you can get all the different perspectives. And what's even more, especially I do this all the time when I'm using my grumpy and my happy and helpful investor, is that I have them answer each other. And
Yes.
so it's the most enjoyment that I typically have in my job is I will ask my helpful dude to come up with something. I'll have my grumpy dude say something terrible about it. And then I'll have the grumpy dude come back and I'll say, that was a little nasty. Like, can you help us out of this situation? And
Yep.
he'll begrudgingly be like, all right, fine. I'll like, this is complete garbage, but I guess I can use my superior intellect to get you out of this thing that you're in. And I just get such a chuckle out of it because it's literally answering itself. And
Yep.
it's such a joy. And you get to do these things. And again, if you're not getting these different perspectives, then you're really underutilizing these tools that you have. And just to say one last thing is, it is common for people to have multiple subscriptions. They'll have an OpenAI subscription, a Claude subscription, a Gemini subscription, and you end up copying and pasting between all of these different things. And I've found people that are just like, I don't remember which system it's in. I'm just so frustrated. I can't remember. Like, I had this great idea, and is it over here? And I'm like, just use like a platform like Charm. Like, just go in there, put all the information in the same place. You can just search for it when you're trying to find it. And you can see which agents answered what and like what they were doing at the time and how you were thinking about it. It's amazing. I go back, I was working on some documents that I was working on almost 2 years ago. And I was going back and I'm like, wow, this is great material. And I had my agents in there like working with me, empowering. And again, like for me to go back and try to use a chat that I had in ChatGPT 2 years ago is like,
Impossible.
it's impossible because you're in these single documents and you don't always start a new chat and there's 50 things intertwined in between them and it's nearly impossible to find anything. Like, don't do that. There are tools to help you.
I agree. And look, if it is Charm, it's great. There are platforms that make this easy. You might be listening to this and saying, oh, I only use ChatGPT and that's my go-to, that's my ride or die. I feel like I should test this out, and you should. And there are platforms that make it very easy for you. My favorite is obviously Charm, but leave us some comments and reach out to us so we can show you how easy it is from the sales perspective, from the BD perspective, from the CEO, CMO perspective. One of the most powerful ways to use this is to get the customer feedback. You have a customer profile, you know who your customer is. Ask your customer, what do you think of this proposal? What do you think of this offer, right? What do you think of this pricing? And have your grumpy customer come in and give you all of the objections, all of poke holes in it. And that way you can be better prepared. Your teams can be better prepared. And what I always tell my clients at the end of the year, they're all doing their reviews. You have your boss persona. Ask your boss, what do you think? It's a great way to get feedback before the real conversation happens. So, Rob, thank you. This conversation hits home with me every time we talk about it. I hope it hit home for our audience today. And you reminded us that asking just for one AI's advice is like basing every big decision on a single point of view, which, as we know, that's a fast track to blind spots and missed opportunities. So this topic that we're talking about today is really important. So for everyone listening, here's your challenge for this week. Take one real decision or problem, big or small, and ask it to 3 different AI models. And don't just compare the answers, pay attention to how they think, right? That's the shift. AI isn't just one voice, it's a whole chorus of voices. And the real power comes from the human learning to listen across that spectrum, right? Not to just one voice you're most familiar with and comfortable with, right? Really do this exercise. I promise you will have an aha moment. And then the opportunity is finding the platform that best supports this way of thinking, this way of working, and this way of living and partnering with AI. thank you for being part of these conversation. It means everything to me and to Rob. We're all learning in real time, and I'm so grateful to share this journey with you. The links to CharmIQ and past episodes are in the show notes. I'll see you all next time right here on Continuing the Conversation. Have a great week, everyone. Bye.
Bye.